There was no real rational thought process around it. I suspended certain critical faculties the way that people do when they're caught up in how they feel about someone else.
Embattled political journalist Olivia Nuzzi, according to its official description, the book is a mesmerizing first-hand account of the warping of American reality that had swallowed her whole.
I did something wrong, right? Those ethics rules are really important. They exist for a reason, and I ran afoul of those rules. And in that way, I hurt the whole industry.
I worked for a bunch of controversial people over the years. I remember I read this book, and he says towards the end, I told myself that I could deal in filth and not become the thing that I touched. And that's what changed the trajectory of my life. That I was like, I gotta get out of this.
Right.
We can know the information, we can even know that we're walking a tightrope, and then it can take us a while to wake up to it.
As much as this was about my mistake within the context of this election, it was this isolated thing where I just fell in love with the wrong person.
Nuzzi exited New York Magazine after her alleged sexting scandal with Kennedy came to light.
And then all of a sudden, I'm faced with this, being confronted over this affair.
Could you look back at the events of the last couple of years and you recognize that person and there's a logic to it, or are you just like, it's an out-of-body experience? I have a book for you.
Thank you.
I thought about it as I was reading the book. I'm going to walk you through the bookstore and pick out some.
Yeah.
This is actually my copy, but I wondered, have you read By Grand Central Station, I Sat Down and Wept?
No, I haven't.
Do you know about this book?
No.
Okay, so I was thinking of books that might be interesting to you.
Elizabeth Smart?
No, not that Elizabeth Smart.
Oh.
Okay, this is a woman. She's in the 40s. She
Okay.
falls in love with this poet.
Uh-huh.
And
Did it end well?
Well, she falls in love with this poet, and a love is an understatement for this. She falls in love with this married poet.
Okay.
They have 4 kids.
All right.
Her family disowns her.
Okay.
She is, I think, deported at one point for like moral turpitude. He continues the other family. She's a famous.
What made you think of me?
She's a famous copywriter. She's like, this would be like if Peggy fell in love with Don Draper.
Okay.
And this really happened. And then she wrote this kind of like fever dream of a novel about it.
The heartburn of its time.
Where she doesn't mention the person's name. She doesn't mention the specifics of it, but it's this beautiful novel about a torrid, life-ruining love affair.
I can't relate to. I can't relate to that at all.
I'm sure you can't relate to at all.
I can't relate to that.
Her parents have the book banned in Canada, where she's from. It just like at one point, I mean, she's so infatuated with this person. He's in London, she's in America. World War II is happening, and she crosses the Atlantic to go be with him, even though she's risking being killed by a German U-boat.
I like that she was deported.
Yes. She's either deported or it's like a violation of the Mann Act, like you can't travel. It's just craziness across the board.
Well, I look forward to reading about this foreign experience. Thank you.
It's a beautifully written book. It's like the source material is torrid and life ruining, but the art that comes out of it is beautiful, but also remains totally mystifying. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's what I was, the reason I thought of you, and then the reason I was going to ask you about it is like, she's writing what happened, but I'm wondering as she's writing what happened, does it make any sense to her?
Right.
Like, did you have that experience? Like, could you look back at the events of the last couple of years and you recognize that person and there's a logic to it, or you're just like, it's an out-of-body experience?
I wouldn't say there's a logic to it, but there's an illogic to it, I guess. Does that make sense?
No. Tell me.
I mean, it's not like I think, oh boy, what happened? It's not like I, fainted in a field of poppies and woke up on the wrong coast or something. But I think I can look back and see like the suspension of certain critical faculties.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to me, but it doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Well, I think people think that, your life can be heading in the wrong direction,
Mhm.
and then you have this sudden epiphany, and then you realize you're heading in the wrong direction, and then you change
Right.
everything.
No.
And it's usually much more gradual,
Mhm.
and then even the exiting out of it is gradual, and then the coming to terms with what happened and why it happened and where it could have gone differently, that's gradual too.
Well, I felt really grateful for the I think I write at one point that I felt like the hand of God came and like swatted me off the path that I was on. And I felt grateful for that. Like it was abrupt
Mm,
and um, unpleasant and um, it was not a smooth landing. It was sort of
sure.
like being ejected from a moving vehicle. But it I was grateful for it. I'm grateful for it now because I thought, well, if that hadn't have happened, because it struck me that you don't just wake up one morning and make a huge mistake, right?
Yes.
It like necessarily there are many minor or imperceptible mistakes that lead to just like a misaligned worldview, right? Or just a misshapen path that you're on.
Yeah.
And I think it, I look back when I talk about kind of seeing the suspension of critical faculties, I see my dismissing that or dismissing
Yes.
discomfort in my daily life, right? Like dismissing thinking that it was possible and that there would be no penalty for like pushing aside things that I didn't want to deal with. Um, and all of that seemed to sort of accumulate into circumstances or conditions that made an enormous mistake possible.
There's another moment in fiction that I thought of when I was reading your book, and then I also thought about in my own life because I have some experience
Hmm.
doing, going down a path that I'm like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
But and I missed it. Like I missed it when I read it in high school. I missed it when I read it a bunch of times. But in Gatsby,
Hmm.
there's this moment where Gatsby comes to Nick when he's trying to get in his good graces, and he says like, "Hey, like." I have maybe like I know you don't make a ton of money doing what you do.
Hmm.
I had maybe this business opportunity you could help me with. And Caraway says, like, only later did I realize that that was potentially a pivotal moment in my life. That that basically Gatsby was trying to draw him into his world, and Caraway sort of dismisses it out of hand because he's not interested in it. But he
Right.
doesn't. That was his chance to enter the underworld,
Right.
right? And you
Right.
don't like the moments where you don't do it or you do it don't seem significant in the moment. You're not like, I'm gambling everything on this because they all feel like small little decisions.
Yeah. And I think I was like this improbable success in the straight world,
Mm.
right? And a lot of my success came from the fact that I didn't play by rules, right? And
Yeah.
I was willing to walk into spaces where maybe I shouldn't have been, or use my wits or whims
Yeah.
to acclimate myself to environments. And when you're rewarded for that over and over again, I think it kind of, I guess it created a sort of feedback loop where I write about Icarus, and someone was asking me about it, like some journalist at the New York Times, I think recently, and their interpretation, which I felt said more about this person as often interpretations often do, um, was that I was talking about being close to like other people's power, right?
Oh,
Circling too close to other
yeah.
people's power. But to me, it was just like I had a misunderstanding of my own power, right? And my own ability to know. I was so used to being right,
Yes.
right? And I
And taking
was,
risks and those risks paying off rather than blowing up.
and people deferring to me, right? Like I got this job at New York Magazine when I think it was like 23 or 24. And I was their first Washington correspondent. And I had never been a Washington correspondent, never covered a White House. And luckily, the guy in the White House had never been there before either, right? And there were some great things about
Yeah.
having a fresh perspective, but there were also perilous things about that, right? But it's a collaborative environment where there are photographers who've been there since like the Carter administration. You could say, is that normal? And they're like, oh yeah, this always happens,
Yeah.
or no, this has never happened before. And but I was used to, I'd say, what do I do about this to like my editor in chief? And he'd be like, oh, you figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
and I'd be like, okay. And then I would figure it out. And
Yeah.
I was correct most of the time. Right. And I think it contributed to just this incorrect view that I didn't have to police my own judgments, right?
Yeah.
Or I didn't have to just second guess myself as it related to my calculations about right and wrong and whether or not a risk was a good one, or whether or not there was um, when I was acting out of ego or fear or selfishness or whatever. And I think that kind of accumulates into this misconfigured worldview.
When you're not exactly surrounded by people for whom strong black and white moral judgments and rectitude is a big priority. I imagine it's destabilizing being around other people who are
Yeah.
also not just bending the rules, but questioning why there are rules at all.
Or just ignoring. It's not even like questioning the rules. It's just rejecting the premise of the rules.
That's what I
right?
mean.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, I've said this before, but it's like Trump's lawlessness. That lawlessness animates the whole spirit of the place, whatever place
Yeah.
that may be, right? And you feel like in order, it's like every cop needs a criminal. You
Yeah.
have to kind of get inside the mind, and the lawlessness inspires lawlessness, and it, yeah. I mean, a lot of the book is about perception,
Mhm.
right? And it's about the distortion of reality, and I was trying to accurately like reflect the phantasmagory, right? Like
Yeah.
and what it just has felt like to be here, and from my vantage point, right?
Yes. I had a moment like that. So for people who are listening, they don't know who I am. I worked for a bunch of controversial people over the years, and this was a messy, exciting period in my early and mid 20s. And like, I remember I read this book, again, another work of fiction, which I do think sometimes fiction gets to the truth of it more than nonfiction can. But Bud Schulberg, who wrote On the Waterfront, wrote this book called The Harder They Fall, which is about a boxing promoter and a press agent. Like, so the boxing promoter is corrupt. It's affiliated with the mob. And he's this press agent who's formerly a journalist. Now he's this press agent. And he's sort of in this morally dubious space. And to spoil the ending, it's an amazing book, but it's not really spoiling the ending. At some point he says, and he's really good at what he does. You know, he's good at placing stories and creating this narrative. They're building this fighter up so he can take a fall. And he says towards the end, you know, I told myself that I could deal in filth and not become the thing that I touched. And when I look back on my own story, I feel like I read that and that's what changed the trajectory of my life. That I was like, I got to get out of this.
Right.
And then I remember I was talking to Tim Miller, who interviewed you.
I loved him.
Yeah, he's great. And we were talking about this because we wrote similar sort of confessional books. And I was like, well, let me go like see when I read that book.
Yeah.
And I read that book in 2009. So I, like many years went, like I understood the information, I understood what I was playing with, and then I didn't do anything about it. So we can know the information, we can even know that we're walking a tightrope or that we're playing with fire, whatever you want to use. And then it can take us a while to wake up to it.
I think you can understand something intellectually though, and it takes a long time to absorb it like energetically and spiritually. But you wrote that book, you were what, like 25 when you wrote that book?
Yeah, 24 maybe.
Right? Yeah. And I reread it when I was writing this, and I had talked to you about some of what I was writing, because I was worried's too strong a word, but like I was trying to sort out the puzzle of like, how do I deal without feeling like I'm shirking responsibility with things that I was a part of that were kind of just had rotten values, or how do I describe those things without it feeling like I'm putting blame on anybody else, right, or on systems or something. And it was important for me to reread that book, because I remember reading it years ago and thinking like, man, this guy's crazy, you know, because it's aggressive is not the right word, but it's like it's a machine gun of a story, right? It's like it's a very it's really effective because it's narrow, and you're not trying to you're not throat clearing, right? You're not and it was, you know, it's like the opposite of how I write in some ways, right? And I found it very instructive to kind of be confronted with that on the other side of my mistake.
Well, I didn't have any literary abilities probably.
No, it's
now
well
or
done.
then.
It's well done.
But I mean, you wrote like a real book about your experience, and that was to me. I don't think I had the capacity then, or the sense that anyone was interested in it. I was just trying to kind of go like, this is all the things that I've seen. Isn't this fucked up?
Yeah, I mean, there's an urgency
Yeah.
to the style, right? I guess that's
Yeah.
what I was trying to describe. Yeah.
Did you? Is that something you wrestled with? Like, because I know I did with the book, where you're like, I'm indicting a system which I am also a part of, and there's kind of that's a tricky position to be in.
I wrote this profile. It was like my favorite piece I ever did at New York Magazine. It was about an anonymous Republican, and one of the many anonymous Republicans who would kind of shit talk Donald Trump
Yes.
during the first Trump administration, but was a part of the system, right? And part of that story, and it was part of what informed the choices I made in this book. But part of the story was about how I think I say something to the effect of like, the press provides the alibi as it prosecutes the case, right? Like it was selfishly in my immediate interests to rely on people such as that.
Yeah.
Even though every time I would rely on an anonymous person such as that, I was further kind of cementing that system of anonymous contradiction
Sure.
with on the record behavior or decisions, and helping to perpetuate this system that's bad for people, right? And
Yeah.
probably bad for American society, and was getting worse. And it's not something I wrestled with necessarily with this book, but like I wanted to make sure that none of my decisions, like I had rules for myself for surviving spiritually, like a scandal and public shaming.
Yeah.
And among the rules were just, everything has to be from love, not for love, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could never use anyone as a human shield. I could never spare myself and harm someone else. My first order was to have dignity amid my big indignity, or honor amid my dishonor,
Yeah.
or handle my ethics scandal ethically, right? And I wanted to make sure I wasn't, making any decisions on the page that conflicted with those principles, or that anything that was coming from fear or coming from ego, and just, like the classic showing, not telling,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that sort of was the standard the whole way through.
I heard you say that somewhere, that you were trying to get through a dishonorable thing honorably. What does that mean to you?
I mean, I was thinking a lot about honor.
Yeah.
Right? Like, when you're being, rightfully, in that case, ridiculed, you're prompted a lot
Yeah.
to think about what you did wrong.
Yeah.
And to assess what you did wrong, to assess what went wrong. And I think there's something very interesting about a crisis, like a public drama, right? Where everyone gets kind of distilled to their essential, like the lawyers are their most lawyery, the press people are their most press people-y. And I felt like, I don't know, my impulse to not sort of judge anyone by their worst behavior kept running into conflict with the fact that I felt like, well, it's like people who drink. If you drink and you're like an angry, mean drunk, that always scares me about people, because I think, oh, that probably is revealing something essential to their character.
Yes.
That otherwise is, not accessible, or that they're able to kind of keep a lid on. And I don't think it's a small thing, right? And I guess it's the same under the kind of external stress of a scandal or public crisis, where I just felt like I was experiencing a lot of people making selfish decisions that were dishonest and like just screwed up. But I didn't want to do that, and it was a lot of me like having to assess really quickly, okay, I'm gonna accept this short-term discomfort or short-term pain rather than eternal suffering, right? And it's actually easy to do that.
But it's interesting that you would respond that way, because I think the fundamental innovation, if you want to call it that, of this moment in culture is that people have figured out that if you dispense with honor
Mhm.
or shame, it's actually a hack for getting out of
Mm-hmm.
scandals and triumphing over them. Like if you
Totally.
just, you throw out any sense of personal accountability, if you refuse to cast a stone at yourself, if you just pretend it didn't happen,
Yep.
actually a lot of the mechanisms that we have as a society for holding people accountable for things, because most of what is a scandal is not actually
Mm-hmm.
illegal, you can kind of survive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, there's always been shameless people, but that's kind of a new phenomenon.
No, I mean, shamelessness like animates public life in America now in a way that I think it feels not new, but it feels like an exaggeration from how I remember it, you
Yeah.
know, in the Bush era or something of my youth. But a lot of people told me like, you know, just keep going,
Yeah.
basically. Like
Yes.
these guys don't care. You shouldn't care either. You should just take whatever assignment to go cover the end of the election. And it was an attractive thought. I was like,
Yes.
oh, like could I just I could just pretend this didn't happen, and then like my insistence that it doesn't matter will eventually like manifest.
Yeah, there's not
right?
an
And
appendage on Jeffrey Toobin columns in the New York Times.
well, and I don't think there should be. Right?
But
Like,
I'm just saying, like,
I-
there are people who
I-
things happen and they just keep doing what they're doing.
But unlike with Tubin, like I did something wrong, right? Those ethics rules are really important. They
Yeah.
exist for a reason, and I ran afoul of those rules, and in that way I hurt the whole industry, and I took that seriously. The kind of like public part of what I had done wrong, and then privately, like morally, spiritually, I took it really seriously. It just seemed like it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't, even if people were like, oh, who cares? And, you know, the few people who were expressing something like that,
You let yourself down.
I cared.
Yeah.
I cared. I did something wrong and I knew better and I didn't do better. Right.
Yeah.
And like that struck me as like, well, it struck me.
Yeah.
Right. And it just seemed like something I needed to take seriously. And I couldn't really like entertain this notion that I would just continue on and continue to, you know, for a second I was like, okay, yeah, maybe I will go cover the end of the election for like Graydon Carter or whatever. And I just like, it would run afoul of the main rule of like, I had to be able to live with myself. Right.
Where does that come from? Because where does that sense come from? Where did you learn that, or where did you pick that up, you think?
I don't know.
Do you think I'm just wondering, is that an innate sense? Is that something you get taught? Is that a religious connotation? Because it's something that is clearly absent, and I'm just wondering how we lost it. Or
I don't know. It's interesting. My brother and I were extremely different. Like he's more type A. Like he was always in sports, and he's a more disciplined person in a lot of ways, like
Yeah.
a lot of overt ways. And in a lot of ways, our parents were not very disciplined people, right? Like they struggled with addiction. My mother struggled with had mental illness, and they both died young. And they were sort of wildly irresponsible in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
But they were really good people, and they were really like in ways that I couldn't have appreciated at the time that each of them died. Like I think most girls who really valorized their father, I assumed when he died, I kind of assumed I was grading him on a curve.
Yeah.
You know, like
Sure.
and I wasn't going to interrogate it too hard. I just kind of felt like in one part of my brain, very tiny voice, like I'm probably overstating things, right? But that's okay. And then but I didn't really know very many people. But he died when I was, I think, 21, 22. And then as time went on, and the more people I met, and the more that I just like was on this planet, the more I came around to feeling like, oh no, he was remarkable in all the ways that I thought, and in ways that I didn't know enough to appreciate. And the way that they both were disciplined was like they were both really hard workers, and they were both. There was a certain honesty to the way that they lived and the way that they tried their best to like be here, right?
Yeah.
And I guess so. I see that with my brother too, where like for him, it manifests more as just like personal responsibility, and like he does Ironman competitions and like but I think I see sort of the same quality in the both of us, and like you have to just deal with the world as it is.
Yeah.
And you can't wish your way out of misfortune. right?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would think, but not everyone ascribes to that clearly.
No, but I mean, is that your problem or
No,
mine?
it's not my problem, but it's just, it's an interest when that was a widely held societal belief,
Yeah.
it acts as a check. And it's weirdly, that's actually the fourth estate, not journalism. Like one's
Right.
sense of shame or honor or reputation or one's ability to be like, yeah, I guess I did fuck up.
Right.
That's actually what journalism was invoking, because the idea that like, hey, if I get caught, that will look bad, and I care about whether I look bad.
Right.
As opposed to I only care if people who like me or
Yeah,
whatever. And so like we have there's a playbook now, right? It's like you fuck up or you sense a bad story is coming. It's like you can call this like the Russell Brand playbook. Like just become a right winger, or right, or conversely, if you're a right winger, you're like actually become a never Trumper. Like you can switch sides, and then that side will forgive all your transgressions, provided you hate the other side.
Yeah,
and it's this kind of like immunity clause you can evoke, right, or invoke. And so what journalism used to do would be the disinfectant, but the disinfectant you had to care. You had to care if you looked bad in this report.
Yeah.
And when that goes away, or if that isn't a thing people care about, we keep throwing the exposés and the articles, and then we're wondering why it's not working. And it's like, it's not working because they just decided that it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's astonishing.
Yes.
And it's also like when I found myself in this just due to my own error, right? This completely bizarre world of like sources familiar and like narratives forming and persisting, kind of contorting just into utter delusion. And if you don't participate in that economy, you're there's a law enforcement cliche. It's, if you're not a source, you're a target.
Yeah.
Right. And one of my rules was like knowing that you refuse to be a source anyway.
Yeah.
Like, because it's like, if you don't play, you can't lose. You can't win either, but you really can't lose.
Actually, you can definitely lose, right?
Because nothing real, right? Like sure, but you can't lose anything that didn't belong to you.
Right. You can lose the media narrative, which is not yours to control anyway, but you win whatever the sort of sense of honor or limitation standards you set for yourself.
Yeah. And I just had to like, one of the things I just always and still would remind myself is like what's fake is ephemeral. Like I have to believe that. Right. And if I don't waste this opportunity of this rapturous crack up of my life, if I don't waste the opportunity to kind of to assess it honestly and to like figure out how to proceed better, then I will be able to correct those things with time.
Yes.
But I can't. I just won't participate in the kind of 3D chess warfare that would be required to win a public narrative. And like also, it's just in public. There's no justice in public narrative. There's poetic justice in public narrative, but there's no such thing as justice in public narrative.
Yeah, and when you look at the people who quote unquote get away with it, do they? I guess the moral question would be, did they actually get away with it, or did they inflict some sort of greater injury upon themselves, which is they lost the opportunity to reform, to change, to understand, to
and that's
grow.
what I mean by suffering, right? Like that, to me, that type of suffering is way too high a price to pay to avoid the short-term pain.
Yeah.
So
what's interesting to me about all that, and I found this as I was reading the book is very restrained. That's what I would say. Like you choose not to use certain names. You have rules that you set for yourself, right? They're like of what you would do and wouldn't do. You're just saying.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
So there's like a restrainedness to it, but it's a restrained person writing about a moment or a person who was so fundamentally unrestrained. And that contrast is interesting. And I wonder if you've thought about that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I write about it a little bit, right? Where it's just like when your privacy is violated, there emerges this expectation that you're going to further violate your privacy, right? That like you must bear everything in order to receive some sort of absolution. But there were aspects of it. I mean, it was because at first I was like, I'm never going to talk about this. I'm never going to write about this. Like, I just, I have nothing of use to share about that experience. But I'm always writing,
Yeah.
right? And then I'm out, in LA, like at the edge of the country, watching the end of the campaign, and it was just my necessary context,
Yeah.
right, for like the literal vantage point and the philosophical intellectual vantage point from which I'm synthesizing what became the Trump era, this 10-year period, right? Um, in which extraordinary things happen, right? He gets elected in the first place. There are 2 impeachments. He's never been there before. It shows. He's booted from office. He's part of what he says is not an insurrection. Others disagree. He becomes a felon.
Yeah.
He's shot at, right? Like it just, and then he's elected again. It's like this epic.
It's unreal.
Insane story. And I always felt like I have to see this thing through.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know when I agreed to cover it, I didn't know that it was never going to end, right? Like I was like the cub reporter and he was the unserious assignment. And so when I was asked to cover it, I was thrilled because he was a familiar character and I felt like I understood something of his psychology. He's from Queens, he's from the periphery of New York, and that kind of, to me, I grew up in New Jersey, that explained a lot of, I thought, the way he operated.
Yeah.
And then it just never ended, right? And it was like this ensemble that kept getting, no one ever left the ensemble, right? It kept getting bigger and bigger and more unwieldy. And I just felt like I was being crushed under the weight of it. And then a lot of people that I covered round 1 with were like, I'm not doing that again. And I thought, like, I have to, I have to do it again because I have to see this through. I don't like, the context that I possess is important. And there's something important about people having a fresh perspective too. And I do value that, but it's also important for people who've been here and know these characters to be here. And so I was intent on doing that. And then all of a sudden, and in some ways I felt like I was at the height of my powers too. And I had this kind of new perspective on him. And I felt like useful in a way I hadn't in a while. And I had a lot I wanted to explore and report out and assess, and then I couldn't.
Right.
Because of my own error.
Yeah.
And it just felt like if I was going to write about any of that, any of the last 10 years, the ways in which my personal life and personal story collided with that distortion of reality seemed like really important context for any reader, right?
I'm not trying to let you off the hook, but I'm curious, like, what you think about this. Something I thought of when I was reading the book is like, yeah, I do agree you were at the height of your powers. I loved reading your stuff, and you're very, very good at it.
Thank you.
There's like, when someone is at the height of their powers, we make exceptions for not even exceptions. We have certain expectations for people who are great, whether it's like sports, finance, or whatever, like music. We understand there's kind of a crazy and a chaos that follows. Like, we don't expect somebody who's putting up 30 points a night in the NBA to have, or selling, a million records a month, to be like orderly and have it all together and have this strict, like, we just sort of expect that, like, scandal and craziness follows. And then there's something about our reaction to what you did that, or your story, that it's not a double standard, but it is like I'm just wondering if there's something about writing or journalism that we're like, no. Talent must go hand in hand with having it together personally, that we're not as surprised when we find out an NBA player is cheating or is doing this or that. You know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, there aren't that many rules for journalists.
Yeah.
So, it's like, it's not hard to not run afoul of those rules, right? And I just did. So I understood last year. I completely understood, and I found a lot of value, frankly, in reading the criticism and absorbing the discourse around it. And even when people were being extraordinarily uncharitable or unkind, often they had something interesting to say, and sometimes I agreed. This more recent chaos that has subsumed the publication of this book is harder for me to take because I felt like, wait, I just did
Mm.
that. Like I did the public ridicule. I fucked up, and I felt like I handled that right. Like
Yeah.
I tried really hard to not make any mistakes in how I handled my mistake. And um why is this happening again? And I hit this wall, and then I kind of came around to, as a coping mechanism, thinking that, like, okay, um maybe I was operating under this delusion that, because I had done the right thing, that I had input good, that I should like extract some sort of good, and it doesn't work that way. Of course
Shouldn't
it
they
of
appreciate that
course it
you're on the
doesn't.
same team?
Like, of
Yeah.
course it doesn't work that
Yeah.
way, right?
Mhm.
Like, and you must do good anyway. And it was important, I think, to be reminded of that.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, right? People are going, "Hey, if I don't do the right thing, I can get away with it. But if I do the right thing, I'm actually it's still going to suck." And so I think people are expecting there to be like um we want karma to be real, and we
Yeah.
want things to be fair and just. And the reality is, like, you can do the wrong thing and get away with it. That happens all the time. And you can do the right thing and still be criticized and not appreciated or not forgiven. That's just
Yeah.
how life is.
Yeah, but I guess it's like, get away with it in what sense, though, right? Because it's like,
Keep your money, keep your platform.
yeah, but at what cost,
Sure,
right?
sure. No, I agree.
I don't know. Like, I think the reason why I'm not crushed, is because I am not, um, I'm not carrying any shame about like my efforts to wriggle out of, um,
Is there a
like,
difference between guilt and shame? Like, because do you feel guilt about what happened? Clearly you're holding yourself
you
responsible. So
brought
at
a
some level
Catholic
you feel
here
guilt. Yeah.
today to talk about this. Well, it's like, I thought a lot about the distinction between shame and embarrassment.
Okay.
Like, I think shame is really important. And I know that's shocking for a Catholic to think shame is really
I
important,
grew up
but
Catholic.
I think shame is important. I think embarrassment is about ego.
Because that's you want people to think about you a certain way. Yeah.
And you think, and it's about public perception, right? Shame to me is an interior experience, and embarrassment is more about an exterior experience. And I think shame can be really important if you have done something shameful.
Yeah.
Like, you should feel shame, and you should, sit with that and figure that out. But embarrassment to me, like, I haven't, none of this has been embarrassing to me, because my value for this book, or for myself as a human being, is not derived from the public perception, right? But in terms of guilt and shame, I don't know. That's interesting. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, guilt. If in the sense you're using shame, which is like, here are my standards, and I
Hmm.
feel X because I fell short of those standards, or I feel pride because I lived up to those
Hmm.
standards, then maybe we're using the words interchangeably.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's good to be hard on yourself. Uh
I guess guilt implies fault. Like, right? You're found guilty. You're not found shamed.
yes.
Right? You experience shame,
Yeah.
right? And I think in a way that maybe you don't experience guilt, right?
But it's funny that we call it a public shaming.
Not
We
a
don't call
public guilting.
or public embarrassment. But like,
Yeah.
so you're saying it's good, but then obviously the thing we do to other people is not good.
No.
Yeah.
No, certainly not. And like is it John Ronson that
Oh,
yeah,
such a good
yeah,
book.
it's such a good book.
Yes.
But that's a totally different thing, right? Like that, I think I consider that more public humiliation
Yes.
than public shame. But I guess it's private shame, public shame are different things.
Well, it's hard because like we talk about cancel culture as this thing that we went too far with. It's obviously
Hmm.
bad, and I would agree with that. At the same time, society does need some mechanism other than the law to say
Yeah.
like, this is not what we do, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
consequences for doing the thing we don't do. Like I think that's been the remarkable feature of the Trump age, that it's like, hey, you can hit your wife on camera
Mhm.
and still run a professional fighting league.
Mhm.
And the irony of also like you run a sport where people just slap each other back and forth. It's like a remarkable thing, right? Like
Mhm.
there's or you can say horrible racist things in a chat and then not lose your job over the, like there has to be some kind of
Mhm.
accountability for it. It's not that you are should be eternally damned or
Mhm.
sent to prison or into exile, but that society does have to have some mechanism by
Mhm.
which we go like, here's the line. When you go over the line, there's consequences for doing that. Do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, I guess it just happens in a slower, invisible way in social situations, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like if you're unpleasant on balance, eventually you're not gonna be invited to the
Yeah.
gathering, right?
Yes.
Like, your, social, circle winnows and winnows,
Yeah.
and but it does seem like our just the attention economy, the kind of rotten values of that, or that people who are loud and, simplistic, that wins, nuance loses,
Yeah.
right? But I always just feel like, okay, the loudest people are probably not who I'm trying to talk to anyway,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yes.
I'm trying to talk to the smartest person in the room, and to me, that's the most open-minded person, the person most interested in and capable of holding nuance, and just the most curious person, right?
Yeah.
Someone who matches my curiosity. Like, I always think about Michael Pollan, who for me is like the North Star, and what he is so among things that he's so remarkable at. He's a hospitable guide, right?
Yeah.
Like, he, as a narrator, you take his hand, and you're reading, and he's bringing you on this journey, whether it's, through his garden, or, you know, into the poppy plant and
Yeah.
out into
Yeah.
consciousness. He's got this book about consciousness coming out
Yeah.
next year that I'm so excited for. I don't know him, by the way. I'm just like a huge fan of
I get it.
of the work. But I like that. I always think about that, where it's like he is not condescending.
Yeah.
He's assuming that you're here for good faith reasons,
Yeah.
and that that he has something to tell you that you're going to find valuable, and like that is the gold standard for me,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, it's like you live in a world where you can get caught on camera accepting a bag of cash, whether that's legal or not. Whether there'll be
recently.
who's the like the immigration czar or whatever, right?
Oh,
Is seen,
yeah.
and like the legal system will catch up with that at some point or not. But that should hopefully. But the point is, like, how does that? How what is? I think we're grappling with the society in which the public revelation of that fact is not does not end anything. It has just zero effect. It's like the doctors are prescribing antibiotics and they're just not working.
Yeah.
And we're just wrestling with antibiotic resistance at a cultural level.
Right. And then the question is like, was it incumbent on those doctors to stop and think, well, wait, are we overprescribing antibiotics,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Or should we be more thoughtful in our prescriptions for whatever is ailing our patients? That way, we avoid a situation where everyone is antibiotic resistant. Like,
And then we have
right?
superbugs.
Right. And so I think when the answer to everything is public shame and cancellation,
Right.
I mean, our whole system was set up with in a consensus reality,
Yeah.
where there was a definition of value, or the shared understanding of value, when there were authorities, and there was public trust, right? And even as the institutions were being built, there was like a faith that they were being built in good faith, right? And that like, it's, what is a high crime and misdemeanor, right?
Yeah.
It's open to interpretation.
Sure.
But why is there no law preventing the bulldozing of the East Wing? It's like, well, they didn't think about that.
Right. We thought
right?
the
Nobody thought about that. I mean, there was no East Wing then, but it's like,
yes. Well, the founders believed that the final check on the system was the idea of personal virtue, right? Like, I think Adam says something like, they'll go through the system like a whale through a net. And so it's interesting that they knew that we were vulnerable to the superbugs, or the antibiotic resistant man on horseback, so to speak. But they just expected that would never happen.
I mean, the if you can keep it part of a republic
Yeah.
is overlooked, I think, right?
Yeah.
And like it's sort of to grandiosely like tie it back to my personal error. It goes back to the um maybe noticing on one level the suspension of certain critical faculties,
Yeah.
or letting things slide with myself, and thinking that I didn't need to judge myself in real time for
Yeah.
in minor things, right? And then that creates a situation where you make a big mistake.
Yeah.
And I feel like in general, there's a kind of, I don't know, part of it's like we just don't have a formal mechanisms for maybe it's like the collapse of institutions and the collapse of the family, right? Liberal institutions, the family unit are in theory like the midpoint before we get to law enforcement, justice departments involved, right?
Yeah.
Like, and if those checks aren't in place, broadly speaking, you can't count on them. Then I guess it's like what you're talking about, where there's no penalty in real time
If
for misbehavior.
if I was talking to you in 21 or 22, could you have articulated these sort of values very clearly? And then there's a period where you sort of you override them or forget them, or is it more like you've come to understand them in the wreckage of what happened?
It's interesting. I mean, I don't think I was consciously thinking about it, right? So maybe I could have had some sort of like egg-headed
Yeah.
intellectual conversation about it. Um, but also in that period, it's like I, it was, everything was sort of hazy. And, I was still covering Donald Trump. I was covering, the pandemic and the end of that first term. And then it didn't really end. And right,
Yeah.
there are all these challenges, and trying to kind of make sense of like what that even was. And then it's like this lithium fire that like the embers of it just spark up again, right?
Yeah.
And like it I was thinking really very little about my own behavior and where I fit in and
Yeah.
my character fit in this kind of broad corruption of character.
I use in the intro of Trust Me, I'm Lying, I was fooling around with that word disintegrated. Like we tend to use, we go like it disintegrated in the air, right? It fell apart. But like if you think about disintegrating meaning not integrated, I was like, that's what, like I had my beliefs, I had my values, I was studying this philosophy, which now like I sort of dedicated my life to. And then I had my sort of day-to-day work behavior. And those two things were not integrated. It's not even that they were compartmentalized. They were just not, they were operating independently of each other. And like the reason they were not integrated is that there's a lot of cognitive dissonance between the two. If they were integrated, then you have to wrestle with the contradiction between what you think your character is and your day-to-day actions. And so you keep them apart from each other. And you just, I mean, being busy is a wonderful way to keep them from integrating with each other.
Right. And like that's one of the things I write about a little bit about being a reporter. It's like I'm someone who really only has a fight instinct.
Yeah.
And you can just fail
Sure.
on almost anything. And as a political reporter, the stakes are built in. You never have to wonder like, is what I'm doing, does it matter? Right. It matters in a really overt way. Even in like small little episodes. And the gift of that is tremendous. Like the few times I've ever been assigned a story about something else, I've always hit this point where I'm like, wait, I need this story to be about the universe, right, and mankind.
Yeah, you need stakes.
And I need it to be life or death here. And this, actor or this is not immediately high stakes in a way that I'm used to. And that is sort of like a gift in the same way that like the great engine for these characters running for office, that's a gift too for a writer.
And there's something too about, maybe this is what drew you to it in the first place, by looking and judging other people, you don't have that you're putting energy outwards that might otherwise go inwards.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I write about, it's like when I started writing, it was really like the height of the personal essay boom for
Yeah.
young women writers. It was like maybe it was like the tail end of the era of like XO Jane, but there was just a lot of that diaristic
Yeah.
writing about young female experience and sexuality. I just could not have cared less
Yeah.
about that stuff. Like I just thought like the stakes are so low.
Yeah.
And I don't have any, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, but I care about things that are going to affect other people, and the arrogance of thinking that you ought to be in charge of anyone else's existence at
Yeah.
like a scale greater than like a dinner party.
I should be the most powerful man in the world.
Right,
or
right. I
person.
should affect your life or the lives of people that you love, and I've got it.
Yeah.
Right. That to me was just an astonishing
Sure.
premise for anything. I couldn't believe that anyone could think that way. And it was endlessly interesting to me.
But isn't it funny? So like
And
that,
it allowed me to just completely turn away from
that seems like there's a sickness to that, right?
Mhm.
And then, but how often does the artist go like, isn't there a sickness in going, the world wants to hear what I have to say,
Totally,
right?
totally.
And they are similar impulses of different scales and whatever. But
Yeah, it's more like, I think it's like immediate effect, or like less perceptible, or just less overt, maybe slower burn effect,
Yeah.
right? But I think that's part of why it's been interesting how all right I've been with like really negative assessments of this book.
yeah,
And on the one hand, it's just that I anticipated, that there just might be um a unpleasant reaction, just the premise alone,
Yeah.
right? But the other part is just like, it's a choice to be a public facing person. It's a choice to create work and submit it for like public consideration. And so you really can't be all that broken up when like the public face is slapped, right?
yeah.
Just-
You control what you write. You don't control what people think about you.
Totally.
Right? What you write. But that's
And not really
still
your
nice.
business.
It's still nicer when they
Oh,
like it.
yeah. I mean, like, one day I hope to experience that again. But like, but it's like you assume the risk that it's going to be
Sure.
unpleasant, and
Yes.
it's still a privilege to do it, right? And it's not a great tragedy.
Okay, so I have a question. So you have
Yeah.
there's a section in here which you've talked about before, but as I wrote a note on it, and I would be curious what you think. You talk about when it sort of comes out. You said it was determined the only way for me to survive such a public relations crisis, tell all, spare no detail, spare my job, my life as it was. This was the offer on the table. You could write your way out of it. The man for whom I worked told me I did not consider this. I wrote. Have you read Molly Bloom's book? You know who that is?
Mhm.
Oh, Aaron Sorkin made a movie about her, but she was that famous. She ran those underground poker games in LA, in New York City, that all these famous and important
Is it
people.
a Kevin Spacey movie?
No, that's a
Oh.
different gambling movie. But she's an Olympic level skier. She she blows out her knee and applies her skills to doing something that you're not supposed to do, right? It's
Mhm.
illegal. No one's dying, but it's not right.
Mhm.
And she becomes quite wealthy and successful running these underground poker games. And eventually she gets caught, as everyone eventually does. And basically the FBI comes to her and says, look, you can keep your illicit gains if you tell us who was involved in what you did.
Mhm.
And she famously gives up the money rather than tell people what she did. Now, one argument is like, you're not doing it because you don't want those people to come after you. But in both the book and the movie, and I've gotten to know her a little bit, she just felt like it was the wrong thing to do. It was I did the crime, I'll do the time. That was my view of it. Now, I'm always interested when people take certain moral stands that I don't totally understand. Like you might go, hey, you're all criminals, or all committing a crime. And why wouldn't you say it? And I think people might say to you, like, I thought that was interesting because this is a central argument of the book, is that, or the conceit of the book, which is that you don't spare yourself, but you don't really talk about anyone. You talk about other people, but you don't name other people, and you don't.
It's obvious who they are.
I'm sure you have receipts that you did not show, right? And that's a moral choice you're making. I'm curious what you think of her moral choice, and then how you think about your own choice.
The two things I was thinking when you were talking about her, the first is just, I guess it's like it would be a sort of reverse entrapment, right, for her to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but
What reverse entrapment? What do you mean?
I mean, like, she's the one who created the environment in which these people engaged in this illegal activity, right?
But some of them are
And
bad people. That would this would be
yeah,
this
no,
be
I'm
the
thinking,
argument. It's like,
I understand
yeah,
her feeling like that's not right. But then also, um, I know I'm thinking about like Tony Soprano, right? And like the pilot to The Sopranos, one of the great pilots, and you know, he says something to the effect of, people used to go and do their time,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's interesting. I get it. I get that. And it's also like using others as a human shield, that type of thing,
Yeah.
right? Like why that feels so wrong. And it's, um, to me though, at the time that I was faced with that ultimatum, right? I was in this conference room in Lower Manhattan, um, talking. I thought that I was going to be talking about something completely different, and then all of a sudden, I'm faced with this, being confronted over this affair, and um, the ultimatum was basically like, you know, sell out yourself and the other party here, um, and then you're forgiven,
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
right? That's your penance for this error. And at the time it was like I didn't even know what, I couldn't have synthesized my experience. Like my experience was ongoing,
Yeah.
and um there were all these other factors too, right? Just in terms of like the security violation, and um the way it was colliding with my work absent the confrontation from my employer, and then just the betrayal that I experienced that, was sort of in process, but had not yet like fully occurred.
Yeah.
Both, from the person I call the politician, who obviously is the health secretary now, or from the person I call the man I did not marry, right? Um, but I I didn't even know really what to tell at that moment in time. Like
Sure.
tell all, write a tell all and say like what exactly, and there was no good set of facts. There was no like version of events in which I was some sort of victim, or in which something had happened to me. Right. And
But
so
there's a
I
version
didn't
of the
under
book you could have written that I think generally
oh,
would
but
have
talking
been
about the
more
book,
redemptive. I just mean across
totally.
the
No,
board.
but
Yes.
talking about the book separately, I mean, I just kind of felt like I shared what felt like it was mine to tell,
Yeah.
right? And what felt like necessary context for what had occurred both with me and my character, right? Um, and the dynamics of that relationship, right? So
Yeah.
like I don't talk, for instance, much about the man I did not marry. I don't write about why I needed to leave that relationship. Um, you may be able to guess at this point, but there's some clues. Um, but like that to me, there's no public purpose for that, right? That would have just been about me and my own like soothing myself somehow, or and
It could make you more sympathetic.
yeah, but who cares, right?
I mean,
Like,
people. I'm walking you through what people would say or think, right? Like, why?
yeah,
What the motivated reasoning of people who might make the other choice would be.
yeah. I mean, I think the version that would have been much more satisfying, which is nothing I would never have considered doing it, would have been, like chapters with people's names
Yeah.
in which I, on such and such date I met so
Right.
and so, and this is what they did, and here's why I am now condemning their character.
Right.
But I just didn't feel that way. Also, like I wasn't angry at anybody else, and even now, like I'm not angry at anyone else. I'm not angry at the person
Yeah.
that I did not marry. And I was not angry at him last year, and wasn't angry at the health secretary for personal reasons. And I think like being able to make the distinction between I disapprove of that person's actions, or I'm dismayed or disturbed by something that someone has done, um, but I can kind of like isolate that and
Right.
assess that for what it is at its appropriate size, and it doesn't have to destroy me or affect my decisions and how I conduct myself in a book or in conversation. To me, that's really important, you
Yeah.
know? And I just never, I felt like I had a lot to say about the last 10 years, and I felt a sort of urgency. Um, and I also I didn't have a job for the first, right? Like you're
Sure.
someone who knows about stillness, obviously.
There's some forced stillness.
Yeah,
Yes.
stillness is important to you. And I had avoided it at all costs.
Right. That's what I sensed, that your life was chaotic and busy as a way of not wrestling with or dealing with things that, some of which probably appear in the book and some of which you're probably still wrestling with and
Probably
dealing with.
will always be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also, it was like, the kind of the hamster wheel of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, that busyness and the kind of like righteous
Mhm.
feeling around it. That there is something sort of addictive is the wrong word, but really attractive about that. And really, and then it's like, it's this linear thing, and everything else is organized around it,
Yeah.
having a task. And like, someone who likes to have a caper.
Yeah.
Like, I think
Yeah.
you've got to have between 1 and 3 capers at all times to be happy. But that constant motion was a really good way to avoid, looking too critically at myself and my surroundings and questioning. It was easier for me to flee. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, I have nowhere to go. I have nothing in particular to do. I have no real responsibilities.
Yeah.
And I found I didn't really have a choice other
Yeah.
than to figure out.
Well, but we're remarkably good at finding things to, like, the other option is you double down on craziness and dysfunction and bad choices. Like, you also could have done that.
Yeah, what would that have looked like?
I'm sure it would have been explosive and
I don't have the imagination for it. I don't think.
it's funny because patterns are clear retroactively,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think about some of the people that I worked for and with, Dov Charney being one. And so that is why I'm reluctant to sort of judge other people for their attractions or their time in other people's orbit, because in retrospect, it makes very little sense to me. But in the moment, it not just made sense, it was like exciting and exhilarating. And I thought I was doing mostly good stuff.
Hmm.
And I remember one time I was talking to my aunt, and she was like, "It's interesting that you and your sister both ended up working for like this certain personality type." My sister at one point had a boss not that dissimilar to mine. And I was like, yeah, whoa, what does that say? Like, it was this
Right.
weird, I go, like, here I am thinking I'm making rational or self-interested career decisions. And then I'm like actually in this Freudian
Yeah. You're in a story.
psychodrama,
Yeah.
for instance. And then I'm like, wow, I wish I had, like, probably no amount of pointing that out would have prevented me from doing it. But it's so obvious in retrospect that it's just like, ugh, what was that? Have you thought about that for you at all?
Oh yeah. And even like over the last, we were talking about the kind of present chaos externally. And I was thinking like, okay, why am I back here? Because it does feel like all of a sudden I'm back here.
Yeah, the one common variable in all these situations is you.
Yeah, right. It's like I am the common denominator, and how did I walked through the door and like I was back at the welcome mat, and I was, it was sort of disorienting, and I was thinking, well, what did I not learn last time?
Yeah.
Right. What do I need to learn this time? Because whether you think there's some sort of divine organization to all of this, or it's an accident of of the universe, wherever you fall along those lines, like materialist, metaphysical, it struck me that it was a loop, right? And so why am I at the start of the track again?
Yeah.
And I should know better how to be here this time.
Are you like, I want to get off this ride?
No, I was at first. Yes, at first I was like, I did not like. I didn't sign up for a round trip. But then now I'm kind of like, wait, why am I back on this? How did I get on this ride again? And do I like the ride?
Sure.
Like, am I what do I not understand about how the ride works? Like, I'm more, I guess, on balance, I'm more curious about what's happening than I am devastated by it. And I have to assume, or there needs to be for my survival, some utility, right? And I felt like the whole time with the scandal around the affair that it was like, if I didn't waste the opportunity of the public shaming and the private shame, that it would be like my new capacity for empathy, if that makes any sense. It felt like this kind of wrecking ball had like hit me in the chest, and that the size of the blast radius would be my new capacity for empathy if I did not react from ego or from fear.
Yeah.
And that it would make me better at what I do, and it would make me a better chronicler of people, if I let it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, if you have any sort of history of making bad decisions, or you're definitely people in recovery suffer or deal with this, where you're like, how do I trust myself, my instincts going forward when the one thing I know is that I shouldn't trust my instincts or what I'm attracted to or what I feel inclined to do.
You know, like I need a conservatorship, right? Yes. And so like, what does my judgment count for then?
Yeah.
Right? If I could admit that there are some serious gaps here, how do I get back on good, how do I regain trust with myself? Yes. Right? And I guess part of like working through those things and assessing, you know, there's a lot in this book that I reveal that like that nobody knew about, that makes me look terrible, right? Like, and I felt part of it just felt like that was my penance for having made mistakes.
Yeah.
And you know, if I lied, I put it in the book, and like I explained that I lied, and or I just did something like totally boneheaded that was wrong in retrospect, right? But for me, it was less about like it wasn't like, it was like, I think I thought it didn't matter, a lot of those things in real time. In real time, yeah. Like it felt so peripheral and so private.
Yeah.
Right. It's just hilarious now that we're talking about it here, but like it just didn't feel important. And then part of like the realization was just like, no, of course, like every little thing matters so much.
Yeah.
Right. Like everything that happens here matters, and every choice I make matters, and whether or not I can appreciate it in the moment, or whether or not it ever looks that way in retrospect, every little decision I make it could be kind of like the flap of the wing that knocks you off your path, or puts you onto a better path, right? And that realization was really important part of the process.
Yeah, I find that the excuses and rationalizations that made sense in the moment, they don't age well. So you tell yourself it doesn't matter. You tell yourself no one's looking. You tell yourself everybody does it, whatever it is. And then, you know, if you get caught a year later, that's bad. The harder thing I found is like, what if you never get caught?
Right.
Right. And you obviously talk about some stuff in the book, but I think there's this line from Epictetus, one of the Stoics. He says, you know, whenever you find yourself criticized or attacked by someone, tell yourself, if they really knew me, they'd say something much worse. And like, you know, oftentimes you're not caught for the worst thing that you've ever done,
right?
Or fully, they're not able to ever fully understand what happened. So there's this part of you that just doesn't know what to do with the things that you told yourself didn't matter. Maybe they didn't matter, but they matter to you, and you carry them with you.
Yeah. Also, I mean, there just was very little conscious thought about a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
Like I fell in love with someone.
Sure.
As unbelievable as the facts of it may seem to a lot of people, which I understand, like it wasn't, there was no real rational thought process around it. Like I just loved someone and cared about them, and suspended certain critical faculties the way that people do when they're caught up in how they feel about someone else.
Yeah.
And that's not to like say that there's no, you know, free will involved in any of that. Not to like activate the free will doesn't exist crowd. But do you think it exists?
Yeah, I think I don't know what we're doing here if it doesn't.
I know you want it to exist, right? It's hard to be a Stoic.
Yes.
It doesn't exist, but like, how
Here,
open are you to the idea that it doesn't?
some philosopher said once, and it's kind of how I try to live my life, which is to assume that you have free will and nobody else does. So it's like all your choices of great moral consequence,
Yeah.
and then everyone else's choice, they didn't have a say in it, and there's a kind of not pity but an understanding and an empathy
Yeah,
for
yeah.
like it couldn't have gone any other way.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what I took out of by Grand Central Station. I sat down and wept, and even your book, which is you go like, man, love is like a hell of a drug. It's blinding. It's it can be deranging, and sometimes it's for the best, and other times, I'm glad that didn't happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of how I try to think about it. Obviously, there's different scandals where it's like the person is sort of overtly I don't know, when the person is victimizing another person, when it's less that and more just like a error in judgment or an overwhelming of one's facilities, I tend to be a little bit like, there, but for the grace of God go I.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I felt a little liberated to write of his character as I experienced it and as I kind of watched it progress or devolve, right? And um, because he had maligned me and lied about my character, right? And so I felt like I owed him fairness and I owed myself affording him fairness, right? Um, but on balance, the public interest in offering my context for what occurred and where it fit within this broader story of this 10-year period of Trump's rise to dominance and like the distortion of reality, that outweighed any feelings of oh well I can't do that, I can't do that, and like because I was no longer violating, the contract had been violated, right? Like, and that doesn't mean that I felt like I had there were no rules and I didn't have to abide by my own code of honor around it, but I did feel like I had total freedom to sort out exactly what I felt like was useful for this story and for explaining what had happened and who he was to me and how I saw him, right? And I mean it's a weird story.
It is
like
it is weird.
It's
weird all the way around.
It's a weird story. Yeah.
There was a scandal in the Truman administration, and he had some sort of old cronies that did some stuff. And there's this famous exchange between him and Secretary of State Dean Axon, who says like, Mr. President, I think you've been loyal to people who have not been loyal to you. And there's something about that strikes us as very unfair. And then I've come to go like, but that's loyalty is not supposed to be a two-way street.
No, I mean, that's how on balance, one of the things I kept coming back to was like my standards for myself are not affected by other people's standards for themselves or for others or for, what they might be willing to tolerate from me, right? Like what is justified is not the same as what is right. And the, definition of having a principle is that it's unaffected by external stimuli, right? Like your behavior is not going to change like how I feel about, X matter. And I that was like an important guiding principle for this and just for this entire era of my life. No one ever talks about young cronies.
Yeah, that's true, because usually they're somebody you go way back with.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well, we apply like we attach terms related to age in funny ways. Like you always hear about ancient grains or like a young coconut.
Yeah.
You never
Well, so much of this is marketing to get people to care about one thing or see it differently than another thing. And I mean, I don't mean marketing so much as like it's coming from corporate interest, but there is just this endless amount. Everything is covered in euphemisms and qualifying and hedging, and that's part of I think wisdom is the ability to kind of strip those things out and be able to see them for what they are.
Right. Yeah. I don't know, I've been thinking a lot in preparing to come here. Thinking a lot about Marcus Aurelius, obviously, right? And I was asked, part of what was interesting about writing through the experience of the affair was just like, okay, were my feelings ever real if he was never real,
Yeah.
right? And I still don't have a satisfying answer for that, right? Like, but I felt like I had to kind of document with as much integrity as possible, like what it was and what it felt like and what, I was experiencing at the time and what it looked like at the time. And like I'm sure my feelings about it and my assessments will be really different in 5 years or 10 years,
Yeah.
or God willing, 25 years or something. But it was interesting. But I also, it's like if we judge Aurelius over like who he was privately to himself, right? Um, and we do broadly, right? Like I do, you seem to,
Yeah.
right? It's I'm not going to weigh whatever rumors or legend about his personal life and taste for vengeance, right?
Yeah, where also a lot of people
right?
think he was like repeatedly cheated on by his wife. And I go
Right.
like, is that a real thing or is that a 2,000-year-old rumor?
Exactly. Right. It's tough to, and so it's like, I'm not going to weigh that against the body of evidence about his character or his intentions that we have. Right.
What about Commodus? His son sucks.
Oh, yeah. Well, but
and he does give him
but a lot of great people have less great children. Why is that? And are you really great if your legacy, your most
one of
direct
them was profiled in your
one of the, like, I mean, if your legacy, your most direct legacy, if that's
Are you
someone
responsible? Are your kids a reflection of you and your character? It's like yes and no.
I don't know. I mean, you have kids, right?
So no, I'm saying it's a yes and no. It's both, right?
How?
Well, I mean, obviously they're learning their values from you, and if you're a horrendous hypocrite, that will have some effect on them. And at the same time, they're their own people who make their own choices. And like, we obviously, we both hold parents responsible for their actions, their kids, and then understand their kids are doing their own thing. It's a complicated, it's a tricky business. It's tricky business is what I'm saying.
It is. And it's like, it strikes me just like anecdotally in my mind, there's like really conflicting in like our courts of law, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes a parent's held responsible for a child's crime,
Yes.
right? And sometimes they're not. And it's interesting. I mean, one of Donald Trump's great, one of the only cases for him having a good character was always like, well, his kids seem to love him and are in his life and are not dead or in jail, right? Like early on, that was like
Hillary says this in the debate. I thought it was one of the dumbest things that she ever said, but okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, how bad could this guy be if his kids are all functioning and seem like at least moderately and sometimes extremely employed?
Yeah.
I never found that super compelling as it related to him. So is the inverse that compelling?
Right.
Maybe not.
Yes, it's
I think you said once, so it's just like great men are often really busy.
Yes, they're just gone a lot. Yeah. I think that
like,
would, if you're like, why is that kid the way that they are? You'd be like, well, his dad was president, empire, billionaire, whatever. You'd be like, that explains it. Good or bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Although it's like, I also just really believe in how powerful individual choices are. Right.
That's what I mean.
And I really believe that like what happens privately within a context between two people or within a family or a classroom or a big institution has very well may change the course of human history, right? It has. And so it's hard to kind of reconcile those two ideas, but
no, it is. I've had this unique experience of not just going through some of the stuff myself, but then because I wrote a book about media scandals, and then also I wrote this book about Stoicism, like weirdly, I get calls from people when their life blows up. Right? Like, and so
I called you.
Yours was like, hey, I'm writing a book. Do you have any advice? Yours wasn't like, what do I do? I've gotten some like, oh, I'm very worried about this. This person is calling me at whether they deserve it or not.
Yeah.
Like if they're a leaf blowing in the wind, and this could go in a bad direction. So I just talk to people who are in the middle of these public shamings.
Yeah.
And we could talk about it a bunch of different ways. But one of the things I have found interesting is the kind of support network that pops up, right? Like I've like there's a handful, like James Fry is interesting. He is like taken it upon himself to reach out to people who are in the middle of those things. I think it's part of his recovery. He's just like, hey, I know what it feels like to know that the world thinks you're a piece of shit and is rooting for this to get worse for you, right? And like, so I've been fascinated by, like, in the moments where that's happening, the people that lean in and the people that go away. I imagine you learned a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, this one was interesting. There's some people who it's like grief, where some people are just really frightened and don't know what to say and don't want to think about it because it's just scary. It's like, wait, but my whole existence is about denying mortality. Like, I can't come near you right now. And that I don't fault anyone for ever. It's just like, you know, you can't, like, people aren't accountable for their limitations, I don't think. But no one really surprised me. I mean, some people have had really good advice. Some of the advice is kind of infuriating in its own way, but they mean well. And so you can't, you know, judge it, I don't think. But no, but, you know, someone had said to me early on, like, you don't have a constituency, so this is going to be really hard. I was like, what do you mean? It was like, oh, well, you're not aligned with the right wing or the left wing, and various factions within those factions hate you. And
also, I would say your audience is intermediated by a publication as opposed to, like,
totally, right?
You know,
and I like that. You know, like, I like a barrier, like, and I like some distance, and there's a lot of space in the book, and I think maybe in some way it was like it to me just feels like kind of the charitable thing to do for a reader, and, like, I don't want to tell anyone how to think, but it's also maybe a way for me to, like, fabricate some space for myself too, right? Like, this goes in both directions. But the lack of that was interesting, and people who've been through it, I found that, like, sometimes people who are public people in some capacity, and understand something of being publicly shamed, still, it's not like not everyone's reached, like, total like, I don't know what the term for it would be, like, the point at which they kind of, like, turn the dial from AM to FM, like the break, right? The Carlin break or the Dylan break, like, the point at which, like, they just baseline, like, don't believe a lot of what they read, or it infects their, like, just that distrust sparked by their own experience and the distortions related to it, or their perceived distortions related to it, creates this more general distrust. Like, my brother on the phone earlier was saying to me, like, reading certain things about me in the press, and something in particular today, I guess, and he was like, it's just making me, like, have less faith in general with what I read, because I know so, like, viscerally that this is so untrue.
Do you know about the Gale amnesia effect?
No.
So the Gale amnesia effect, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but it's basically like when you read an article or you watch something from press about something you know a lot about, you see all the problems and you know, inaccuracies and insufficiencies, and then you turn to its coverage of the Middle East or the stock market or whatever the thing you don't know about is, and you're like, sure, that seems true. or like the amnesia effect is our willingness to see how terribly wrong it is in one, or unfair or biased, or the weaknesses in the area that we have the expertise. And then we conveniently forget that elsewhere, or with time we forget it elsewhere. You could argue AI has a similar effect, where it's like, if you ask it something you really know about, it's woefully insufficient, but then you're like, here, plan my vacation.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I think, you know, I write in the book about how in this time period, this 10-year period, it's like the anything seemed possible. And, like, on the one hand, that is a literal inspirational slogan, anything's possible, but it also landed as a threat, right? It was like anything could be believed. Because anything was possible, and there were no boundaries all of a sudden, because there are no standards, because there's no consensus, because we're not living in a consensus reality,
and there's no consistency either. It's
none,
wildly,
because consistency requires boundaries and consensus, and there has to be some shared understanding of value, and those things no longer exist, right? And that is fascinating to me, right? And that's sort of what, you know, I have personal responsibility for it, and like I have free will, I think.
Yeah.
But like, nevertheless, it was in that environment and assessing all of that closely, in which I made a mistake, right? And that was interesting to me.
Well, the reason I was asking about, who reached out is not that I'm not looking for names, but there's a beautiful scene in Oscar Wilde's book De Profundis,
Mm.
where he talks about this moment he's being transferred from one prison to another. He's, his life is ruined over, what we would now say are, nobody's business. But at the time, everything is taken from him. His wife, his family, his money, his reputation, and he's being transferred from this one prison to another. And a friend, something Robertson, I'm forgetting his name, his friend, he walks down the hall, and his friend's just standing there, and he just kind of like smiles and nods his head, and he says, like, in this moment, that is everything that Jesus was supposed to represent. Like that is the Christian tradition there, that like in your darkest, most abject public humiliation, the person who says, like, I see you and I haven't forsaken you.
Yeah.
And I do think, obviously, public shaming is bad and inexcusable, and we can't do so much about it as a society, but we can, as individuals, decide to be that person when someone we know is going through something like that.
Yeah, and I think I feel like I've been really fortunate in a million different ways, and that's one of them. Like someone asked me recently, like, oh, like, did you lose a lot of friends during? I was like, no, what? Right? Like over like, I was shocked by the question. Then I thought, like, oh wow, like my great fortune that it didn't even occur to me that people with whom I'm consider myself really close friends, that there might be any doubt, right? Like,
Really?
and I thought that was it was like I felt stupid, and then just so lucky that it
Yeah, I
hadn't
think that's
even
more unusual than you think it is.
I I mean, I guess, or it's just like uh my friends know how stupid I am, right? Like what?
Were there people that in the moment were like, what are you doing? Like before it happened? Like
Before
I
it
sometimes go like,
happened.
I wish someone would have told me. And
Well,
then when
nobody knew. It was a secret.
but did they see a direction you were going? Like I just think about moments and I go, I wish someone told me. And then they're like, we did try to tell you.
I don't I also was just making myself scarce, And it's like, I think when you're keeping any kind of secret, um you keep a lot of other secrets, right, in the process, and like
We're as sick as our secrets, as
yeah,
they
and
say.
something I mean, something I read about in the book, because with my mother and like the dynamics of the house that I grew up in, on the one hand, they're like honest people, and on the other hand, we're all sort of living in this weird within this weird secret of her mental illness and her alcoholism. And it was a lot of my existence was about the upkeep of lies, right? To protect her, and protect, I don't know what, but I just remember it being exhausting, right? And then but there's something sort of comforting about that too. And it's like, oh, am I replicating this pattern of like falling back into a dynamic such as that? And like, seems so, right? And I think I write about, like, to my mind, there's this sort of like paradise within the privacy of a lie. And in preparing to roll out this book, I remember I was reading with a meeting with a PR person. I was anticipating a crisis. And
yeah, really, it's quite a prediction.
Yeah, and they said something to the effect of like, oh, well, like, I assume you want to fix your like Google results. It's a lot of crazy stuff in there. And I was like, I kind of felt terrified by the notion of that, because there's a sort of anonymity in having a lot of bullshit about you out there, right? Like, in some ways that's much less scary to me at this point than like this, right? Or and yeah, I don't know. I can't remember what the question was.
No, I wonder sometimes when I know people that are like twisting in the wind what the obligation is, like,
Right.
like, because it's obviously there's a spectrum, right? There's like they're totally innocent and they don't deserve this. And then there's the like, they really did it to themselves. And then there's the, bro, I think there was a time to stop emailing Epstein. Okay.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like there's the broad spectrum of like
Yeah.
how you decide to deal with someone who is in the hot seat.
Yeah. Although, actually, never. I was going to say something about Epstein,
Yes,
but
it's
I
always
changed the
safe
narrative.
territory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
safe territory. I wanted to change the narrative, so I wanted to talk about Israel and Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
That's okay. But I, you know, I don't know. I kind of think it's like grief, though, where it's like my view is that whatever private judgments I may have about anyone's behavior, um, you could always be a human being,
Yes.
right? And
Mhm.
that doesn't mean that you have to defend them either privately or publicly, but I'm going to be a human being first,
Yes.
right? And form criticisms once I have enough information. But usually, there's nothing close to a complete set of facts available,
Right.
right? When someone's first, in a public shaming, and I, that's usually been my point of view about it. And sometimes I'll get like a message and I'll think like, oh, guess it looks that bad, huh? But like, I
Yeah, would you
guess
say like when Monica Lewinsky is checking in on you, that's
she's.
bad?
But it's interesting because so many people have brought her up to me, and she's so lovely, and like I really am just like awed by her ability to come out of that with just all of this kindness and grace, intact, and all of this empathy, and because you could see very easily how it could have gone another way.
Of course.
But I felt very much like, okay, well, because people keep mentioning her to me, and it's like, well, what happened to her happened to her.
Yeah.
Right. Her prefrontal cortex is not developed. Like, this is not, there is an enormous power imbalance. Whatever else was true about that, like, it happened to her.
Yeah.
And I happened to me. Right. So it
Yeah.
feels very different. Like,
It does. Although I would say,
Yeah.
looking back on, couple centuries of scandals, it is very rare to find one historically contemporary where you look back and you go, we were not hard enough on that woman.
Yeah, we need a
there's,
witch to burn. Yeah, we
Yeah.
always need a witch to burn.
Yeah.
And but I also like I can withstand burning.
Mhm.
So it doesn't like it's all right by me,
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just saying, that's a rule I try to think about just
Yeah.
as a person when I'm forming. I go like, hey, how is this? Now that we have some distance on any number of them, are we like that instinct, whatever that is in the human tribe,
Mhm.
does not age. It does not age well. It ages like milk.
Not typically. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's nice we're consistent about something.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But conversely, it's not so true the other direction. We often do let certain men off with a slap on the wrist and then come to regret it. We're like, I mean, look, generally, probably public shamings are not good. But I would just say, like, when you look at things that we get upset about, we're usually like, yeah, we were too hard, not too.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of like sexual fervor animating the public discourse is interesting, and that just sort of feels like, okay, I'm in a very old story
Yes.
here, right? Like,
Yes.
I am it right now in this story, or I'm back, I guess, for like season 2, and that's interesting. And it doesn't, even though it feels violating, it doesn't feel personal because it's not, right? It has almost nothing to do with me, like
Yeah.
in the actual facts of anything. But that, I don't know. I get it, and I'm interested enough in it to, again, like, to not be cowering about it. And I'm trying to think. I mean, it's complicated because it's like I get why, I get why it's a tough one for people to process. And I'm orbiting pretty close to Earth, right? Like, I'm a nearer villain to, like, treat like a pinata versus like anyone like in the federal government, or it's easier to
right, like one
do
of
that.
the people that sort of went through the both books for me, that it was always it was like Billy Bush read both my
Mhm.
books like back to back, the Stoicism one and then the media ones, and you go, yeah, like in retrospect we sort of came down on the dude who didn't do the thing,
Yeah,
you know,
but
like
he's a translator for right.
yes,
Like he is the middleman, and I was
he's more
the
accessible.
middlewoman, like translating these people. Like the great privilege of what you do is as a journalist. It's like you go places and you step in rooms and talk to people who are of interest and consequence to the general public, but most of the general public doesn't have the time, interest, desire, ability to go and do that. And you must report back like for them, and you've got to be thinking about like, well, what do
Yeah.
they need to know, right?
Hmm.
And it's a privilege to do that. And I, fucked up in such a way that I put that kind of contract in doubt.
Yeah.
And then so I understood the last time
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
Like I understood the kind of general
Well, access is a tricky thing, right? Because
I'll say
maintaining the access, using the
yeah.
access, knowing when to make the break, when to do what Janet Malcolm says is the sort of dishonor, like
Right.
when is the betrayal?
Well, I always think it's I always think about Janet Malcolm, and I always reread The Journalist of the Murder.
Mhm.
And but I also think of, I think it's Jean Marie Lascaux who said, when I report, I fall in love. When I sit down to write, I get divorced. And I
Yeah.
never have felt that way. Like I don't I always felt like if I think it's like really the Gay Talese model of, if the subject is surprised, that means I have failed in some way.
Mm.
But I like to argue, and like if I disagree with someone's philosophy or something they've stated, like I want to talk about it because I want to understand the nature of the disagreement, like why they feel that way. And
Right.
that's what, to me, what the access is for. But also it's like, as much as this was about my mistake within the context of this election, it was this, you know, it was this isolated thing where I just fell in love with the wrong person, right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like a broad, my work has never been in doubt, right? Like for whatever it's worth, and maybe not much, like, the magazine I was working for, New York Magazine, like, had some scary law firm like conduct their review of it. And like, it's not like my broad coverage and like the 10-year period that we're talking about here has ever been in doubt, right? Like nothing's ever been retracted. Like there's no, so that's been a little frustrating, just seeing kind of like but trust and respect are fragile things, right?
In retrospect, do you see that you have a tendency to compartmentalize? Like that's kind of what I noticed. It's like you love this person, but what this person is doing, not just to you, but like their actual stated sort of like policy goals,
Mhm.
like those seem to be, again, disintegrated, or even like some of the people that you're like talking to in the
Yeah.
book after it's all happening. I'm like, oh, okay. Like I don't know, that it seemed
Yeah,
you seem to like, is that the journalist part of you that is able to like,
probably.
yeah,
Probably. But also it's like, I mean, parsing this like is probably stupid, but for whatever it's worth, like in the period of time that we're talking about, it's not as if you know, this was like a kind of peripheral third party effort. Certainly he was not under the impression that it was going to end up how it ended up for a very long time, nor was I, right? Nor was anyone else. And it wasn't as if we sat around and talked about the MMR vaccine,
right.
Like,
Yeah.
so
But his
it's
negative
like,
impact on the world predates and would exist without becoming
but
Secretary of Health and Human Services.
on vaccines, I understand what you're talking about, but then it's also like, and part of this is, operating under the delusion of just like wanting to assume the best of someone that you love, right? But it's like, I do see that, on the environment, on just Monsanto alone,
Sure.
right? Like those are big, important things that like I valued and like I thought were admirable, right? And I also just like, I think because I was so good at compartmentalizing, like my job is to talk to people with whom I have, in most cases, enormous differences, right? And to be able to have a productive human conversation and try and understand something of them as a human being, understand their psychology, you can't really go into that just with judgment,
Yeah.
right? You can hold your disagreements and those don't go away, But like if you're just sitting there vibrating with contempt
Right.
because of the differences of opinion, it's never going to work. And I got really used to that, right?
Right.
And I think it made it much easier to kind of like just focus on the human being and discount the rest. But I also like I wasn't sure for like, you know, we didn't talk, you know, we talked about music and poetry and, you know.
Yeah, and this sounds more judgy than it is, but it's like that expression, your mind's so open, your brain fell out. Like
No, but I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair, but it's also just like that, you know, it's not a rational thing to fall in love in general.
Mm-hmm.
This is perhaps particularly irrational.
Yes.
But like it's not it's going to end in some sort of immense pain.
Yes.
Right? And so no matter what the premise is, or the premise of just like counting on another human being, all of these things are baseline irrational, but also essential to the human experience, right?
Yes.
No.
Well, I don't know where to land this thing. I don't know where, if you
Me
missed
neither.
anything.
I think I didn't.
No, I'm just being general. You want to go check out some books?
I would love to.
Okay,
yeah.
we'll go in the bookstore.